You know that feeling when you open a brand new, like, 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle?
Oh, yeah, pure chaos.
Right. There's that initial moment where it is just overwhelming. You have all these totally unrelated pieces dumped on the table, like a patch of blue sky over here, a sliver of a face there.
And you just completely rely on the picture on the box, right? Like, you have to know what you're building before you can actually start building it.
Exactly. Because we just naturally want order. We find the corners, we do the edges. But imagine if someone dumped out all those pieces, threw the box right into the trash, and then suddenly, as you're staring at this mess, the pieces just start rearranging themselves.
That sounds terrifying, honestly.
It kind of is, but they form a picture you have literally never ever seen before. And that is exactly what it felt like for moviegoers in 1994 when they sat down in a dark theater to watch Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction.
Yeah, it really wasn't just a new movie. I mean, it was a total disruption of how cinema worked. Audiences didn't just watch it, they had to, like, survive it and piece it together in real time.
Well, welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are taking you right into the heart of that 1994 indie powerhouse. We're drawing from a really comprehensive encyclopedic breakdown specifically, this massive Wikipedia article that details the film's production, its crazy plot, and its huge cultural footprint.
And it is a massive footprint.
It really is. So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack how a movie built entirely out of, like, secondhand debased parts, a script that was actually rejected by a major studio for being too demented, somehow transformed into a postmodern masterpiece. A masterpiece that single-handedly changed the economics and the style of Hollywood.
And honestly, the behind-the-scenes reality of how this film actually got made is just as wild as the movie itself.
Oh, it is absolutely insane. We are going to explore some truly wild moments with you today. We're talking about an actor literally weaponizing a fast food hamburger during an audition.
Such a great story.
Right. And a completely mistaken wig purchase that accidentally altered film history. And yes, we are going to tell you the actual real-world secret behind that glowing briefcase. So you get to piece this intricate puzzle together with us today.
I love it. But, to really grasp the cultural earthquake that Pulp Fiction caused, we really have to start with the very first thing that shocked audiences back in '94. And that is the structure.
Right, the way it was built.
Exactly. The way the story was fundamentally built from the ground up.
And what's so fascinating is that the origins of this massive cultural touchstone actually go back to this mundane video store in Southern California. That's where Tarantino and his co-writer Roger Avery worked.
Video archives, yeah.
Yeah. And their initial idea wasn't even some sprawling, non-linear epic. It was actually meant to be an anthology film.
Right. They originally envisioned 3 short films directed by 3 different filmmakers, and the major inspiration was actually this old Italian horror film called Black Sabbath.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah. They wanted to tell separate crime stories using the oldest, most worn-out cliches in the book. You have the aging boxer who is paid to throw a fight but won't, or like the mob enforcer who has to take his boss's beautiful wife out but knows he absolutely cannot touch her.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because everyone knows the structure of this movie is famous for being out of order.
Yeah.
But if you actually sit down and unscramble the movie, what does the real timeline even look like?
It's actually staggering when you map it out linearly. So the film is spliced into 7 distinct parts, right?
Okay.
If you were to watch them in chronological order, the sequence of events would actually run part 4, then part 2, then part 6, then part 1, then part 7, then part 3, and finally part 5.
That is wild. It's like a cinematic Mobius strip or something. Like the ending is the beginning, the middle is the end. It just loops back on itself.
In a completely dizzying way, which, as you can probably guess, absolutely terrified the studio executives.
I bet. Because they were looking for that picture on the puzzle box, right?
Yeah.
And Tarantino just wasn't giving them one. What specifically were they bumping up against?
Well, when the script first went to TriStar Pictures, the executives just balked. The studio chief at the time, Mike Medavoy, reportedly read it and put it in turnaround. He called it too demented.
Too demented. That's quite a note.
Yeah, they thought it was entirely unfilmable. And the biggest complaint was the continuity of life and death.
What do you mean?
Well, they couldn't wrap their heads around the fact that characters who were clearly violently killed off in one scene were suddenly, like, walking around alive and well, talking about cheeseburgers in the next scene.
Oh, right. Because to a traditional studio executive in the early 90s, that just looked like bad writing.
Exactly.
Which brings up my main question, why do it? Why take a perfectly functional crime script and just shatter it into a million nonlinear pieces? Like, what is the actual mechanism at play there?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is really about fundamentally changing how an audience experiences a film.
Okay, tell me more.
So, usually when you sit in a dark theater, you slip into a very passive state. Tarantino referred to this as the alpha state. You eat your popcorn, you relax, and you let the narrative just sort of wash over you like a dream.
Right, you're just on autopilot.
Exactly. You trust the director to guide you safely from point A to point B, but by breaking the linear structure, the film physically snaps you out of that passive viewing state.
Because your brain gets a jolt.
Right. When a character dies and then reappears, you can't just sit back anymore. You have to lean forward. You are forced to actively participate, to do the mental math, to reassemble the timeline.
That makes total sense.
As Tarantino himself noted, it creates this incredible energy in the room because it's actually fun to watch an audience, in his words, chase after a movie.
They're chasing after a movie, but, like, what grounds them are the faces on the screen, which is another totally crazy part of the story, because a fractured, unconventional, quote-unquote, demented script like this desperately needed serious star power to anchor it for mainstream audiences.
Oh, absolutely.
But they had a microscopic budget of just $8.5 million. So how did they even get movie stars?
The financing is honestly a masterclass in independent filmmaking. So TriStar drops the project, and then Miramax Films picks it up. Harvey Weinstein was enthralled by the script, making it the very first film that Miramax fully financed on their own.
Okay, but they had to keep costs down, right?
Right. So producer Lawrence Bender executed this brilliant egalitarian plan. They paid all the main actors the exact same weekly rate.
Wait, regardless of whether they were a massive A-lister or like an unknown indie darling.
Exactly. Everyone got the same weekly paycheck.
That is staggering when you think about the egos involved in Hollywood. I mean, take Bruce Willis. He plays Butch, the boxer. In 1994, he was a massive global action star. Why would he ever agree to a tiny weekly indie rate?
Well, Willis was in a bit of a tricky spot at the time. He was a huge star, sure, but he was coming off a string of critical and box office flops.
Ah, so you need to win.
He really needed a prestige hit. He needed to remind people he could act. So he took a massive pay cut for the artistic credibility of the project. But in return, his name alone was the anchor that guaranteed the film's international profitability.
Just by having his face on the poster.
Yeah, Miramax was able to pre-sell the worldwide rights for $11 million just by having Bruce Willis attached.
So they were basically in the black before they even shot a single frame of film. That's incredible.
Yeah.
And then you have John Travolta. I mean, this was a legendary career revival for him playing the hitman Vincent Vega.
A total comeback.
But reading the sources, it sounds like he almost didn't get the part. Who did the studio actually want?
The studio pushed incredibly hard for Daniel Day-Lewis.
Wait, really? Daniel Day-Lewis is Vincent Vega? That is a completely different movie.
It really is. I mean, Day-Lewis had just won an Academy Award. He was the obvious prestige choice. But Tarantino just held his ground. He had written the part with Travolta's specific energy in mind, and he simply refused to compromise.
And speaking of energy, we have to talk about Samuel L. Jackson. Because he plays the philosophical hitman Jules Winfield. And I was reading through the source material and his audition story. Wait, is it actually true that he weaponized a hamburger during his reading?
It is entirely true, and it perfectly encapsulates the chaotic magic of this production. So Jackson thought he was just coming in for a basic, low-stakes script reading.
Right.
But when he arrived at the casting office, an assistant mistakenly greeted him and called him Mr. Fishburne.
Oh, no. Mixing him up with Lawrence Fishburne, that is a terrible start.
Exactly. So Jackson is already furious. He's also incredibly hungry, and he had just bought a fast food hamburger.
Okay, setting the scene.
So instead of putting it away, he storms into the reading, angrily eating this burger. He's waving it around, taking these really aggressive bites, basically using it as an intimidation prop while delivering these intense, violent lines to Tarantino and the producers.
That sounds terrifying.
It was so visceral and scary that it basically guaranteed him the role right on the spot.
And what's brilliant is that specific, like, angry burger-eating energy actually became the core of the famous Big Kahuna Burger scene in the movie.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't just an audition quirk. It translated directly to the screen.
It totally did.
And the happy accidents just didn't stop there. How did a mistaken wig purchase completely change Jules' character?
Oh, this is a great example of how the actors really shaped the film. So Jules was originally scripted to have this giant, almost cartoonish afro. But a production assistant went out and bought the wrong wig entirely. They brought back a Jahari curl wig.
I can imagine Tarantino was not thrilled about that.
He was furious at first, but Jackson just calmly convinced him to keep it. Jackson explained that an afro would feel like a cheap 1970s blaxploitation caricature.
Oh, that makes sense.
Right. But the jury curl, that was the exact hairstyle currently popular with NWA rappers like Ice Cube and Eazy-E.
Ah, so it really grounded the character in the present moment.
Precisely. It took Jules out of a cartoon reality and gave him a very specific, menacing, contemporary cultural touchstone.
Okay, so I have to push back here for a second. Think about everything you've just described. You have major A-list actors taking massive pay cuts. You have assistants buying the wrong wigs. You have actors getting called the wrong names and eating burgers in the director's face.
It was a lot.
It's chaos. With all these massive egos and this completely frantic indie environment, how did this whole thing not completely collapse into a disaster?
It's a really vital question. And the reason it didn't collapse is that the actors recognized what Tarantino was trying to do, and they brought their own real-world cultural baggage to the roles to support it.
What do you mean by cultural baggage?
Well, look at John Travolta. When audiences saw him on screen in 1994, he wasn't just Vincent Vega. He brought this lingering, faded aura of his 1970s disco star persona from Saturday Night Fever.
Oh, I see.
Or Bruce Willis. He wasn't just playing a boxer. He was actively modeling his performance on 1950s tough guy actors like Aldo Ray. They were using their own past, their own recognizable public personas to flesh out these characters.
So they were bringing all this real-world cinematic baggage into a universe that, frankly, wasn't grounded in the real world at all. Because the world of Pulp Fiction is basically built entirely out of the recycled parts of other movies and pop culture.
Yes, exactly. Pastiche is the academic term for it. The film is a patchwork of cultural references.
Let's look at the most famous prop in the movie then, the briefcase. So Jules and Vincent are tasked with retrieving this briefcase for their boss, Marcellus Wallace. The lock combination is 666.
Right, the devil's number.
And when they finally pop it open, a golden light literally glows from inside, illuminating their faces. Now, for a decade, early internet forums theorized that the briefcase contained Marcellus Wallace's soul. What does the source material actually say?
It's a wonderfully spooky theory, but strictly an urban legend. The sources confirmed the briefcase is simply a MacGuffin.
And for the listener who might not be a film major, what exactly is a MacGuffin?
A MacGuffin is a pure plot device. It's the shiny object that the characters care deeply about, which gives them an excuse to move the story forward, but the audience never really needs to know what it actually is.
It just drives the action.
Exactly. Tarantino originally considered putting diamonds in the briefcase, but he decided that was just too boring and cliche. So practically speaking, for filming, they literally just hid an orange light bulb inside it.
A literal light bulb. That's hilarious.
Yeah. But the concept of the glowing briefcase itself is actually a direct homage to a classic 1955 film noir called Kiss Me Deadly, which features a very similar mysterious glowing box.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. The music is doing the exact same thing as the props. There is no traditional, original orchestral score sweeping in to tell you how to feel. Tarantino used existing surf music. But why? Like, why use upbeat California surf music for a gritty, violent movie about hitmen?
Because of the tension it creates. Tarantino explained that to him. Surf music sounded like rock and roll spaghetti western music.
Oh, that's a cool way to put it.
It has this frantic, twangy, almost aggressive energy. When you pair that sunny, retro sound with ruthless criminals walking down a dingy hallway, it creates this bizarre, anachronistic vibe. It tells the audience, you are not in the real world.
Right, and it doesn't stop there. The famous dance scene at Jack Rabbit Slim's between Travolta and Uma Thurman, everyone at the time assumed Tarantino was just winking at Travolta's disco past.
It definitely looks like it, but it's actually an homage to a famous dance sequence from a French New Wave film by Jean-Luc Godard called Bande à part.
And then there's the pawn shop scene. So Butch, played by Bruce Willis, escapes from the basement but decides he has to go back down to save his boss, Marcellus. So he's standing in the pawn shop looking for a weapon. He cycles through several options. What exactly are we looking at in that sequence?
It's basically a rapid-fire visual history of cinema.
Yeah.
He picks up a hammer, which is a nod to the Friday the 13th films. He picks up a baseball bat, referencing the Untouchables. Then a chainsaw, which is obviously the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
And then he finally settles on the katana.
Right, which is a massive tribute to the samurai and Yakuza films that Tarantino loves.
Okay, so I have to challenge this. If the briefcase is from Kiss Me Deadly, the dance is from a French film, and the weapons are from horror and samurai movies, is Tarantino just a cinematic kleptomaniac? Like, is he just ripping off old movies and putting them in a blender, or is there genuine originality happening here?
What's fascinating here is that your question defines the very essence of postmodernism in cinema. He isn't just copying, he is recontextualizing.
How so?
Well, the originality comes from taking these tired, completely worn out genre tropes, the mysterious briefcase, the tough guy boxer, the stoic hitman, and applying real life rules and mundanity to them.
What do you mean by mundanity?
Think about the title Pulp Fiction. Pulp literally refers to those lurid, disposable, hyper-violent stories printed on cheap, rough paper in the mid-20th century. Tarantino takes those cheap pulp concepts and elevates them into high art by making them mundane.
Oh, I see.
He makes ruthless hitmen complain about foot massages, the metric system, and what they call a quarter pounder with cheese in Paris. That friction between wild genre cliché and boring everyday reality is the actual genius of the film.
That makes so much sense. Okay, but beneath all these flashy pop culture references and the incredibly cool, mundane dialogue, critics have passionately debated what this movie actually is at its core. Because when it came out in the 90s, the culture wars were raging.
They were indeed. The cultural reaction was intense and incredibly polarized.
Right, because our sources point out that you had politicians on the right, like Bob Dole, publicly criticizing the movie without having even seen it for promoting the romance of heroin.
Yeah, that made a lot of headlines.
But then on the flip side, you had cultural critics on the left who praised it for its diverse cast and its brilliant deconstruction of macho heroic violence.
Yeah.
And obviously we're just looking at the source material here, so we aren't taking a side, but it was a true cultural lightning rod.
It really touched a nerve.
But reading through the breakdown, it seems that beneath all that debate about violence, there might actually be a deeply moral story hiding in plain sight. And strangely enough, the key to unlocking it might be the bathroom.
The bathroom motif is honestly one of the most consistent, deliberate, and revealing structural elements in the entire film.
Okay, let's track this. Every single time the hitman Vincent Vega goes to the bathroom, absolute disaster strikes.
Every single time.
He goes to the bathroom at Mia Wallace's house, and while he's washing his hands, she finds his heroin, mistakes it for cocaine, snorts it, and overdoses.
Oh.
Later, he goes to the bathroom in the diner, and while he's in there, Pumpkin and Honey Bunny hold the place up.
Rice.
Finally, he goes to the bathroom in Butch's apartment, leaves his gun on the kitchen counter, and when he walks out, Butch shoots him dead.
It is an undeniable pattern.
And the detail I love. In two of those scenes, Vincent is literally sitting on the toilet reading a trashy pulp novel called Modesty Blaze. So what does this all mean? Is Tarantino just using the bathroom as a running gag? Or is it almost like a moral trapdoor for Vincent? Like the second he stops paying attention, the universe punishes him.
A moral trapdoor is a fantastic way to look at it, because that aligns perfectly with the critical consensus of his character. Vincent Vega represents pure nihilism.
Okay.
He drifts through the film without a care. Think about the pivotal scene where he and Jules survive a point-blank shootout miraculously unscathed. Vincent entirely dismisses it. He just calls it a freak occurrence.
He refuses to see any deeper meaning.
Exactly. He rejects the idea of divine intervention. He prefers to stay stuck in his literal pulp world, reading his cheap pulp novel in the bathroom. He ignores the signs the universe is giving him, and ultimately his nihilism is what gets him killed.
But Jules, his partner, has the exact opposite trajectory.
Right. Jules Winfield experiences the exact same miraculous survival during that shootout, but his reaction couldn't be more different. And this brings us back to his famous Bible passage, Ezekiel 25.1 really.
The path of the righteous man.
Yes. Now, a fun fact from the sources, the first two lines of that speech are completely fabricated.
Wait, really?
Yeah, Tarantino actually stole them from a Sonny Chiba martial arts movie called The Bodyguard.
Of course he did. That is so on brand.
It really is. But the function of that speech within the story is what matters. Early in the film, Jules recites it just because he thinks it sounds cool. He uses it to intimidate people before he kills them. It's just a cold-blooded prop.
Right, it's just words to him.
But after surviving the shootout, he sits in the diner and actually reflects on the words. He recognizes the concept of grace. He actively chooses to interpret their survival as divine intervention. And because of that moment of clarity, he makes a moral choice to walk away from his life of crime.
And because he walks away, he survives the movie. Wow. He refuses to be pulled down by the pulp, and he gets to live. That is incredible. I mean, a rigid moral framework dressed up in a Jerry curl wig and surf music. It's really no wonder that this deep dive into the sources reveals such a massive, enduring legacy.
It really changed everything.
It did. Pulp Fiction went on to gross nearly $214 million worldwide on that tiny $8.5 million budget. It won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival. It essentially became the Star Wars of independence.
It absolutely was. It proved once and for all that independent films could make legitimate blockbuster money. And in doing so, it forced every major studio in Hollywood to create their own indie divisions, which permanently altered the landscape of cinema.
Just a total paradigm shift.
Yeah.
But as we wrap up today, I want to leave you with one last mind-bending idea from our sources to mull over. We've talked a lot about how Pulp Fiction is universally celebrated as this ultimate postmodern love letter to cinema.
Mhm.
But one critic argues that its true DNA might actually be television.
It's a fascinating theory, and it raises a really important question about the media diet of the generation that actually made this film.
Think about it. We think it's all about French New Wave and samurai films. But look at the text. Christopher Walken's famous character, Captain Coons, who delivers the gold watch monologue. He feels exactly like a 1970s TV trope.
Oh, totally.
And the characters are constantly referencing sitcoms like The Brady Bunch or The Partridge Family. Uma Thurman's character, Mia, talks extensively about her failed TV pilot, Fox Force 5, which sounds exactly like Charlie's Angels.
The movie almost operates like you're flipping through a nostalgic issue of TV Guide.
Exactly. So the next time you watch it, ask yourself, is this monumental, game-changing cinematic achievement actually just a massive feature-length tribute to the generation raised by the glow of the TV set? Are they just taking the reruns of their childhood and building high art?
They took the scattered pieces of their pop culture youth and built a masterpiece no one saw coming.
Just like that jigsaw puzzle where the box is missing. You dump the pieces out, and somehow, against all logic, they assemble themselves into something brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. You've been a fantastic third person in this conversation, and we cannot wait to unpack the next puzzle with you.